Hey Kings, and welcome back to the Augustus Maximus channel, and today we'll be playing as Fascist Spain, both covering the Francoist path as a fascist, as well as proper Falange Spain. Now, we'll be starting off with the Francoist path because, well, it's the easiest, it's the quickest, it's something that we've all played since the release of La Résistance, and also it's something that basically everyone has played, at least to some degree, even if you don't own the DLC, because Spain in the early game is probably the best way to learn about micro, to learn about combat in general in Hearts of Iron 4, and so I think that everyone generally has played as Spain, especially the Francoist path, so it's gonna be a quick one, but basically there are several issues when you're playing Spain. It's sort of a list of grievances if you want to specify, and the first one, obviously, being the Civil War. Now, as the Francoists, the Civil War is basically the easiest thing in the world. You can get it done basically in 1 year. It's nothing too terrible, and overall, it's actually quite a good time because you can you can earn a lot of XP. Now, obviously, in real life, it's not a good time, but in this game, it's quite a good time when it comes to earning XP, leveling up your generals. The Spanish version of the Japanese-Chinese war, where the Japanese player can earn a lot of XP, grind his generals, level them up, earn and doing so boost his doctrines and research and everything like that. And so, to a certain degree, the Spanish Civil War for the Francoists is actually a really good time in regard to boosting up their military capabilities for later potential conquest. Now, the Francoist path, the way I'm going to be trying to play it today, is that we're going to try and set the world basically against itself. We're going to create so much chaos that no one's going to notice us stealing an empire for ourselves. That's basically the battle plan today. We're going to try and play the Allies a bit like a fiddle, play the Axis like a fiddle, and then come out with it with a great empire at the end, roughly at 1940, 1941. And so we're gonna basically rapidly expand our borders, and hopefully it's gonna be a good time. Okay, so I skipped over the Civil War because basically nothing of interest happened. You just fight the Civil War and it's basically extremely easy, but what we're gonna try and do now is to make the Allies guarantee Finland. Now, because we're fascists, we're gonna join the Axis, obviously, and this is going to make it 10 times easier for us to, well, basically deal with the Allies, because they now not only do they have to fight against Germany or the Axis in general, but they also have to focus on the Soviet Union, which means that their navy is going to be much more dispersed. It means that we are going to be able to just steal an empire. And the Francoist path in general is sort of geared towards gaining an empire or gaining territory that's sort of more closely located closely to your core Iberian provinces. At least from the focus tree, that would be obvious, because, for example, the Falange Spain path that we are going to focus on later, and that focuses more on retaining the Spanish global empire, so to say. But with Franco, it's more about, taking over Vichy North Africa, expanding a bit in Africa, expanding towards Portugal, even creating a faction with them, and sort of creating a new power bloc in the southern Mediterranean, or the southern European theater, I suppose. And that's, well, it's interesting. It's interesting that this sort of path, even though you're fascist, it sort of sets out that your growth should be very limited when it comes to the borders. You technically, through the focus tree, don't have an option to declare war on Portugal, but obviously you can just do that because, hey, this is Hearts of Iron 4, you can justify war goals on anyone. And actually that guarantee of Finland by the Allies is gonna help us when it comes to a war against Portugal and quickly gaining all their territories, because it basically means that the Allies are going to be busy fighting the Soviets, and so they shouldn't really be all that eager to guarantee Portugal as well, but we'll see, because well, sometimes the British, obviously there's this Anglo-Portuguese alliance still in place, so they do like the Portuguese, and so maybe you have to boost relations every now and then, but other than that, I think it's actually completely viable just to declare Portugal in every single Spanish focus tree that you have available to you after the release of La Résistance, except for the Francoist path and the democratic path. The Portuguese always get it, man. They're always gonna get killed. Okay, target number 1, Portugal. They should go down fairly reasonably quickly, and the AI never does the coring, well, was it Mozambique and Angola, and they never do that, so we actually should be fairly safe here. Because the AI never does those coring decisions, meaning they never get any sort of decent manpower, meaning they can never field a decent army. And anyway, the AI of Portugal and Falange Spain, to be honest, is supposed to be neutral, so they never really focus on that stuff. They mostly focus on the industrial build-up and the resource build-up, with the army being sort of not all that important to these nations, so to say. And there we go. First bit of empire conquered. Okay, so I'm now doing the Demand French North Africa from Vichy France, which should give us all that territory. But sometimes I've seen them decline this. Well, more often than not, they do decline your offer of guarding their North African colonial holdings, and then you have to declare war on them. And there's a fine way of subverting that thing. It's actually going to be a bit of a bother if they accept and do give us these lands, because, well, theoretically, that's a good thing, but in actuality, yep. Okay, they accepted. Of course they accept when I'm recording. Of course they accept. But yeah, in all my test runs they declined. I've only seen them accept like once, maybe right after La Résistance was released. But I suppose we're just gonna have to justify on them. I mean, our empire is looking a little bit better, but it's just gonna have to grow a bit more. Okay, so justification on Vichy done, and here comes the really sleazy part. Now, they're guaranteed by the Axis, but if we just join the Axis... yeah, there we go, and then declare the war anyway, there we go, then it doesn't matter, and they're never gonna join the Allies. Now, it's a bit of a shame that they actually, lost a whole bunch of territories to Free France through the focus trees and whatnot, so we're not gonna be able to gain Syria and some of the islands in the Pacific and the Atlantic and stuff like that. Sometimes you can do it really quickly, even sort of preempt the Japanese takeover of French Indochina, but then you have to be really quick on your feet, and the French unfortunately accepted our offer of actually taking care of French North Africa, so that really messed up this whole timing of this whole, general plan, because, well, you're gonna see what's coming up next. While our navy might not be the best in the world, it's definitely no Spanish Armada anymore, it's definitely good enough to capture the English Channel. Just a second, the British run out of fuel and are distracted with their navy somewhere else in the world. Off we go, and there we go, maybe, hopefully, yeah, there we go. The British never covered their ports, and they have no fuel, and once they run out of the meager fuel reserves that they do have, well, you can just take control of the English Channel and just dump your entire army on the British Isles, and off we go. The second coming of the Spanish Armada, of like 15 ships that are actually mostly just destroyers, and like First World War dreadnoughts or something like that. But off we go, we're gonna capture the British Isles, we're gonna defeat the Allies, and we're gonna capture a whole bunch of territory. And there we go, just in the nick of time, because the United States were about to join the Allies as well. Well, there we go, as the Francoists, it's actually incredibly easy to just steal an empire while nobody's looking, and to just invade the British Isles to actually gain a couple more territories in Africa, because that's, after all, what we're here for. And so, yeah, we threw the world into chaos, we played the Axis a bit with the whole Vichy France situation, we played the Allies with the whole Finland situation, them having to fight the Soviets as well was a real big help, and then we just rapidly grew an empire, just out of nowhere. Essentially we just stole an empire while nobody's looking, and that's actually quite cool if you think about it that way. So anyway, off to the Phalangists. Okay, moving on to the Phalangist path, and the Phalangist path in general, or the Primo de Rivera path, whatever you want to call it, the Spanish Empire path, it's a very different beast to the Francoist path, mostly because the Civil War is such a mess. Essentially, the Carlists, of course, split off from you because there is no uniting figure that would essentially fuse the two parties. Thus, the Carlists, of course, have an uprising, and it means that the Spanish Civil War turns into a four-way civil war between the Falange, the Carlists, the Republicans, and the Anarchists. However, the big difference between the Republican sort of crisis when they have the anarchist uprise and the nationalists when they have their little civil war, the inter-civil war sort of between the Falange and the Carlists. The main difference between the Republicans and the nationalists is that the Republicans sort of don't have to modify their front too much. Essentially, the anarchists tend to always uprise in Catalonia. You know that. Which is sort of on the fringe of your front line. However, when you're playing as either the Falange or the Carlists, the Civil War tends to just rip apart the entire sort of core territory of the nationalists, which is quite a bit worse because all of a sudden you're not only fighting on the front line, but you also have to deal with an enemy uprising in the back line. And that's supposed to be your safest part, the safest part of your country, and all of a sudden, it just explodes, and that's quite a bit tougher. So, because you have a tougher civil war, we have to deal with quite a lot of unrest after the civil war because the fighting has been going for so long. You lose quite a lot of equipment. It's not a very easy deal, and because the civil war is such a mess, it tends to last longer, obviously, which means that we have less time to join the Second World War, which means that we have less time to recover. And the Phalangists don't have the best recovery options anyway. That would be the Francoist path and the Communist path. Actually, the Stalinist path and the Francoist path both have the best recovery options when it comes to the economy. However, the Phalangists don't. The Phalangists, paradoxically, a majority of their sort of economic recovery or gain of economic power, military factories, civilian factories, infrastructure, and the resources, a majority of that is supposed to be gained through conquest, more specifically global conquest. This Phalangist sort of national path, or whatever the focus tree path that the developers have outlined is, whereas the Francoist path was more sort of regional. You take over North Africa, you maybe deal with the Vichy French, you maybe join the Axis, you maybe take over Portugal, but more rather than not, you're actually creating an alliance with Portugal and Italy. It's the Phalangist path is mostly about this global conquest, the regaining the lost Spanish colonial empire in Central America, South America, and the Philippines. And it's quite a big mess because the majority of the time you're of course going to be fighting the United States, and we can't exactly do that alone. So, that being said, my grand plan is here is that we rush the Civil War. After the Civil War, we rush everything that has to do with military, create as many divisions as possible, pump them out just relentlessly, and then help the Axis by invading the British Isles, very similarly as to how we did it with the Francoist path. However, this time, because we're going to be rushing all of the invasions of the British Isles and war with the Allies and everything like that during the Axis, we won't be able to take over Portugal, which means that we'll have a significantly reduced amount of resources, civilian factories and military factories, as well as the equipment in general. And that's going to create a whole bunch of problems. However, if it works out, it's going to work out, and it's going to mean that we'll essentially have a great path forward. Now, this is, of course, just speculation. I've played the Francoist path many times before, but I haven't really played the Phalanges that much. All I know is that the Civil War is quite a big mess. And I do have an idea of how I want to do this, but not a very concrete one, apart from just invade the British Isles, deal with the Allies as quickly as possible, and then we'll see where we go from there. Because an alternate strategy would be to just completely ignore the conflict in Europe and join the Japanese, because they're going to war with the Americans anyway, right? So maybe you want to actually help them out in China, gain a whole bunch of resources from Macau after taking over Portugal. So you finish the Civil War, take over Portugal, similar to the Francoist path, but then instead of attacking the British, you attack Guanzi Clique, take over the resources in southern China, help the Japanese. That's an alternate path. But I do feel like that would be a little unreasonable. We wouldn't be able actually to help a whole bunch in the Pacific theater. and a majority of our focus tree is sort of aligned towards the American sphere. We do gain a whole bunch of puppets through one focus, so it would actually be maybe better to quickly take out the allies, and I'm going with that strategy because it's incredibly easy as the Francoists, and we do have the same amount of ships essentially as the Francoists. Those the navy essentially gets transferred to the Falange. The Falange usually receives like all the equipment, all the volunteers, everything that the nationalists or the Francoists essentially have. So, this is going to be quite a bold plan, but hopefully it's going to work out, and hopefully we'll manage to attain quite a substantial bit of land through just invading the British Isles, and yeah, hopefully it's going to work out because this is going to be, well, it could turn nasty really quickly. Okay, so on the Civil War side of things, I'm absolutely annihilating the Republicans. The Carlists, however, we are about to quote-unquote eliminate them. Obviously, we just gain a small buff when it comes to the attack and defense against the Carlists when they initially have their uprising. However, I don't have high hopes for when that actually happens, because the Carlists tend to uprise. Yep, there we go. Carlist uprising. They tend to sort of fight from the territories that have the best industry, at least the best industry that the industrial places that you've built up as the nationalists, even during just regular civil war, because that's sort of your core territory, that's your best territory right there. It doesn't have any negative modifiers for you. So while we managed to take over the middle part of the country, sort of the core of Spain itself, the Carlists have the best nationalist land, and so this could turn out to be quite worse than expected. However, we do have the we do have the best generals in a sense, because I only focused on using the generals with the Phalangist alignment, obviously, which means that our generals have well, they're just skilled more. There we go. The Second Republic defeated, which is actually very good news, because that means that we can focus solely on the Carlists, and this was actually a great civil war. We managed to do a whole bunch of encirclements, which is basically what you want to do when you're playing in the Civil War. You just want to do a lot of encirclements, because the other side, well, it's going to take a long time before they can actually recruit any substantial divisions, right? Any substantial divisions that would be actually be able to hold the front line at all, apart from the volunteers. Now, it's going to be quite a bit tricky, because the Carlists have, after a bit of build-up, the Carlists have the best army in the game. They have the best modifiers. They have some of the best generals after you grind them up a bit, and they have some of the best advisors when it comes to war support, which grants a better core defense, or defense on your core territory, obviously. And so hopefully it's going to be nice. Hopefully it's going to be fine. We still have those volunteers from Germany, Italy, and Portugal, but it looks like it's going to be fine. Another issue is that you're essentially pushing into territory that you've never really fought in before, so you don't have the stagnant frontline debuff. That debuff has never been removed from planning an offensive. That was a very big lag, but we're now the Spanish Directory, properly Phalangist, and that's actually that's interesting. The one good aspect you have when you're playing Falange Spain is that you have very good advisors, which is actually surprising. You have very good advisors, and you have a lot of core manpower available to you, not as much as the Carlists do. You don't have, like 6% or whatever you can boost it up to in like 1940 as the Carlists. But you do have a lot of good advisors when it comes to stability, war support, industry, and reducing, or just basically boosting up your economy. You don't have many good economic focus tree decisions, like well, you do have, but since we're going at a sort of a breakneck speed here, we want to crush the Carlists as fast as possible and join the Axis as fast as possible and deal with the Allies as fast as possible. We won't be doing the independent Spain sort of economic boosts, but we'll be doing the Axis economic boosts, because those, in a sense, are actually really powerful. They do give you a lot of infrastructure. They do give you a lot of, obviously, factories, military factories. That's what we are here for. But you don't get access to autarky, which is the sort of independent Spanish nationalist way of recovering from the Civil War, which is open to the Francoists and the Phalangists. And that one is actually the best. That one gets basically rid of all your debuffs by 1941. Immediately after the Civil War, if you just rush autarky, you'll get rid of all the debuffs, the economic debuffs from recovering from the Civil War. However, we can't do that. So hopefully, our advisors will be enough. We don't have the best military advisors, but we do get them cheaper, and we also have a specific military theorist when it comes to mobile doctrine, which is additional. Well, we won't be really doing much with tanks, but you have to think that it's at least a little bit better than purely going with tanks. I don't know, maybe we'll get a bunch of manpower if we do decide to go with the mobile doctrine, but yeah, so we can always change the doctrines later, obviously, but I do think I'll be sticking with the mobile doctrine for a while. So we finished the Civil War a while ago, and in case you're wondering, yeah, the unrest is actually quite bad. So bad that I had to employ an agent to deal with them, because, oh man, this is peak Spanish performance. To be honest, it's sort of historically accurate, but at the same time you can remedy it by just not focusing on your military so much right after the Civil War. However, this time we really have to do that because our industry is just shredded. We have no manpower and we need to pump out as many divisions as possible to actually eventually invade Britain for the Axis and help them deal with the British Isles and the Allies in general as quickly as possible. So to do that, we're going to have to take into account that maybe the populace isn't going to be that thrilled. Wasn't there. There she is, Primo de Rivera-chan. But yeah, there she is. And she actually does, or he, Primo de Rivera, whatever, the country leader does reduce the cost of military of your military staff eventually. So it's quite a good leader, quite good bonuses, little reduction to your political power, but actually if you take him as a government advisor, he boosts your political power, which is kind of strange, right? But he negates himself essentially, which is quite curious, but hey, that's just how it is. I suppose it ensures that he's going to have ample employment. But there we go. The resistance to our government, I suppose, is quite harsh. And another thing that I often don't appreciate about Franco is that he has the best recovery options as well. And not only that, but he has also an additional boost or an additional modifier as a country leader, which essentially removes quite a bit of unrest due to the reduced damage to garrisons, which means that you have more manpower, more equipment, everything like that. So something I believe the Carlists also have an advisor which lets you boost compliance essentially or reduce resistance. One or the other. So the other two nationalist sort of sides have way better ways of actually handling resistance, but unfortunately, Phalanges-chan here is going to be stuck in quite a pickle. However, it's sort of necessary because we don't want the Axis to get dragged into war against the United States any sooner than we want to actually join the war against the United States. And I do think that since we have basically half our focus tree focused on expanding in the Americas, we'll be the ones to drag the Axis into a war against the United States. But before that happens, we need the Axis to be at peace for a little while. Maybe they can do their own thing in Russia. I'm not really going to bother about that. I'm not really going to join them in that combat at all. Don't really care about that. But we do need to have them a little bit at peace so they can build up and prepare for the eventual conflict against the United States. Obviously, I need the same time as well, because as it sits right now, if the United States were to join the war against the Allies right after we sort of get rid of these debuffs and everything like that, it wouldn't be a good look. So we need to rush this. It's going to hurt for a little while, but after that, it's actually going to mean that we'll have very good strategic positions, because that's one thing I'm actually planning ahead for. Once we take out the Allies, yes, I do have player-led peace conferences on, but even if I didn't have that, I sort of have it on so that I can create better borders, because the AI sometimes creates just hideous things. But even if I didn't have player-led peace conferences on, I'd basically just take a whole bunch of territory from the British within the Americas, so that we'll be able to launch a successful offensive. And even if you don't have that, because you do gain a bunch of puppets in Central America anyway, it's basically just going to result, it would have resulted in the same scenario, hopefully. When we eventually take up the Allies, I'm sort of, talking as if it's already a done deal, but, invading the British Isles isn't actually that big of a deal. But with no army and your country burning constantly, 24/7 on fire, and just shooting your garrisons, it actually might be a bit worse. And by the way, yeah, I switched to superior firepower because after thinking about it a tiny bit, I realized that yeah, mobile warfare is not going to give us any real boosts, and we don't necessarily need manpower. What we need is good infantry because, well, we only can really rely on infantry. Our industry can't really support a good base or any sort of, industrial complex for the tanks. So yeah, we're gonna have to go with superior firepower. And since we do have a lot of army XP after the Civil War, hey, why not? Why not, right? So yeah, hopefully it's going to work out. Hopefully it's going to be decent. Hopefully it's going to be good. I just hope that we manage to do a proper invasion of the British Isles. That's all I want. This is, in the early game, that's all you need, really, because you need the situation in Europe to calm down a tiny bit. You need the Axis to sort of power themselves up. You sort of wish the Japanese a whole lot of luck when dealing with the Americans, but you mostly want the Japanese as a distraction to your own desires, your own goals, because the Japanese in this new patch, unless you boost them yourself somehow, they're actually quite terrible. Okay, here we go. The big day is approaching, and essentially we'll do a very similar strategy to what we did last time. We'll essentially just camp on the English Channel, not worry about any other country in the world. We're not worried about Africa, even though Spain can actually big help in Africa. We won't worry about the Atlantic. We won't worry about anything except for the English Channel and sniping the exact second the British run out of oil, so that we can we wait for them to be distracted, for example, in the Mediterranean. The Italian sort of operations in Africa can actually be a big help with that, so we want, might as well just join the war, whatever. But they'll set up the invasion and we'll wait for the exact second, and might as well just sort of preemptively do it. However, I don't think, because before you join the war, you can't actually see if how many ships the British will actually have in the English Channel. Last time when I played as the Falanges, I got lucky. However, sometimes when the British completely annihilate the German Navy, they don't really bother with keeping any ships in the English Channel. The Germans, for some reason, just gave me a whole bunch of divisions here in Africa, so hey, might as well just use them. But hopefully we'll get lucky. The Axis might as well just take out Gibraltar. That's gonna hopefully lock in a bunch of English ships in the Mediterranean, and so we won't have to worry about them. But it seems like, it's not gonna go too well. So we might just have to sit on our hands here a bit and just camp it out, because the British have a massive navy and we have like what, 20 ships, 30 ships. So it's not looking all that great. Not to mention our ships, even there's roughly 30 of them. We have like, interwar battleships, basically dreadnoughts, and we have pretty decent heavy cruisers. However, it's it's not looking all that great on the naval front, so we need to do this. So we need to camp for the exact second the British don't have the fuel to support the ships, or they maybe just pull out of the English Channel for 1 millisecond. Maybe if we bomb them enough, the Axis like to completely focus all of their air on the English Channel. So hopefully it's going to work out. And I might as well just fiddle with these things. Hopefully it helps. I don't know. I'm not really a naval expert. I just know that, you should just do some stuff with it. I'm not entirely sure. Not really a naval expert. I know that you should have like a balanced navy. Like you should have submarines and destroyers and battleships, maybe some carriers, maybe some cruisers. I know that you shouldn't really engage at high risk, but other than that, it doesn't really matter too much to me. I don't think it matters overall. The British are actually reducing their presence within the English Channel, so maybe maybe the bombing is actually helping quite a bit. Might as well. Yeah, not many, not many planes in the air for the old Spanish Empire. Not really looking all that imperial up in the air. Not really looking all that imperial anywhere, to be honest. But if we get this one lucky break completely flips the entire nature of the war on its head, and allows the Spanish Empire to just dominate the globe again. Might as well use these Germans to some effect while we have them. But yeah, I'm just camping here. I don't even have enough equipment really for the divisions that I do have. So you could really say that I rushed everything, just for this exact moment, and it's not looking all that great. So hopefully we're just looking for one lucky break in between the fall of France and when the Americans join. You just need one lucky break. That's all you need to destroy the Allies. But yeah, well, the country is actually still just burning, but who cares about them? Who cares about them? I haven't really done anything of those, any one of those like coring decisions or whatever. But just one lucky break. Come on, Britain. We need. If it was reduced to maybe like 5,000 or roughly something like that, it would actually be quite beneficial. But unfortunately, yeah, they're stubbornly holding on to the English Channel. Maybe because we have air over that region. Maybe just the AI does it defaultly because it knows that that's actually a very good way of invading. We have 0 casualties sustained, 0 participation. We've done nothing essentially, even though we've essentially helped the Germans to gain Gibraltar right on side. That's one of the big reasons why the Axis essentially wanted Franco to be supportive. Even during the war, they wanted the access to Gibraltar, so they'd have access to agent captured. Wonderful. I'm also doing a bunch of spy stuff in Britain. Not entirely sure if that helps at all, but hopefully it's going to do at least something, and that's honestly more than I'm hoping for. So increased air presence, of course, that's always a good thing, but other than that, we need one lucky break. And that's gonna flip the entire war in its head. I'm sort of sounding like Mr. H in Berlin in 1945. We just need one offensive to flip the war. But yeah, this is really, honestly, all you need when you're fighting against Britain. Maybe we're actually getting close to it, but it's gonna require some time. Okay, so after it just flipped to 0. All stations are a go. Hurry up. We really need this. Hurry up. This is gonna be the big push. This is gonna subvert the entire war effort. This is going to be it. Yes, there we go. It just flipped to 0. I said that. I said it. You need 1 millisecond that the British don't focus their entire navy on the English Channel. Just 1 millisecond, and just need to get lucky once. You need to get lucky once. They need to pay attention constantly to the English Channel. You need to get one lucky break, and you win the entire war. That's the nature of invading the British Isles. Obviously, as for example the French, it's much sort of more lenient because you do have a big army yourself. It's very much the same deal with, for example, Germany if you do a lot of naval build-up, or Italy if you stage or if you put your entire fleet in the Northern Sea or in German ports. Essentially, you don't need as much of a lucky break as with the Spanish, where they essentially just pull out of the English Channel completely because they run out of fuel, or they are distracted in Norway or in the Mediterranean, or maybe the Japanese declare war on them or something like that. But yeah, he managed to do it. But because our army is still quite well underpowered, to say the least. I mean, it's 1940, and well, the Spanish Falange, sort of, when you're playing as the Phalanges, you sort of get ready completely when you're at peace for the war in like 1941. 2 years essentially after the Civil War, you're sort of like on a state, within a state of like a regular country, or essentially about the same power of it as Italy at the beginning of the game. And it's 1940, and we've done nothing but building up for military. We haven't focused on the industrial side at all. So this is the one gambit. This is the one trump card that we can play. So hopefully it's going to work out great. As the Francoists, it worked out great because, well, we had a whole bunch of time to just sit around. The Civil War was pathetically easy. Franco is great at dealing with the civil strife after the Civil War. We got basically Portugal on our side, and we got a lot of industry from them, a lot of equipment from them. So this is the one. Well, this is the one gambit. This is the all-in play essentially. This is all we have going for us, and it sure would be nice if it worked out, but I'm not entirely sure. It's looking a lot like it might not, because I'm basically just pushing with like really inferior divisions. These are like 10 width divisions that have basically just guns, and that's it. And that's it. I do have a couple of 20 widths in between there, but I don't know. Well, hopefully it works out. If it does, then that's great. If it doesn't, then well, I'm just gonna restart and forget about this recording. But as a plan, you can see that it works. You can definitely see that it works. You need that one lucky break and you can invade the English Channel. It sure is a shame that the entirety of the Axis isn't here supporting me, because instead they're fighting in Africa, which doesn't actually mean anything. You know, it's not like we're gonna defeat the British if we take over their African colonies. We're gonna defeat the British if we take out the British Isles. That's how this game works. But the AI doesn't really get it. There are no Axis soldiers here with me. This is all just the Spanish Empire pushing right now. Yeah, sure. Italy claims on Greek territory. That's important right now, guys. That's definitely important. Not the push into Wales that's going on right now. No. Better focus on Greece. Yep. The British aren't actually resisting that much. I would have thought that they'd have more troops here. I sort of thought in the back of my mind that maybe we'd be able to stagnate the front around the Thames, and then I would slowly build up more and more better divisions and just send them to the front, sort of as a trickle, and maybe hopefully take out the British right before the Japanese involved the Americans in the Civil War, essentially sort of mimicking the Franco's playthrough. But this is actually going quite well by all things considered, or all things considered, this is actually going quite well. It sure is a shame that the Germans have their entire army, you know, on the mainland of Europe, and they're not doing anything with them. Not a single thing. Well, I don't know. I guess the British at least aren't trying to invade the Spanish core territory, so might as well bring forth more trashy divisions. And yeah, that's essentially all that's going on right now. Because if the garrison isn't garrisoning from everything, might as well just throw them into the meat grinder, and hopefully that's going to do something. Because if it's not, then well, the Japanese are gonna have a field day when they bring over America into the war, and we're gonna be, well, just stuck on the island, and the Americans are gonna invade Spain, and yeah, that wouldn't be a great look, would it? So, yeah, onto the meat grinder you go, guys. It's yeah, there we go. As fellow kings, I assure you that you're all gonna have a fun time with the British Isles, and it's going to be wonderful. But we're actually proceeding rather nicely. It's sort of a strange situation in the AI, I feel like, because the Germans are actually, they tend to be extremely aggressive, and so tend to be the Italians. However, if you make a landing for them, it's a strange scenario, because when you make a landing and you're a member of the Allies, the British just rush in. They rush in, they eat up all your supplies, but they rush in, they immediately defend every single landing spot you take. However, the Germans, they don't. The Germans, they dominate everyone on the mainland. As soon as you declare war on someone, and it's sort of on the mainland of Europe or Asia, or they have a direct land route, they immediately go there. However, you invade the British Isles, and they don't do anything. And this is a tendency that I've seen sort of repeatedly with the Germans. It's sort of strange, don't you think, that that's the one thing that they dedicate most of their troops towards? Like, at least send a couple of panzer divisions, you know? It would be extremely helpful, but even when we played as Franco, they never sent anyone. I think that's sort of a big issue with the AI, as they're too hard-coded maybe towards certain tactics. Like, the Germans are really great when it comes to the land army, but they don't do anything but that's sea-related, but they do actually manage to land in Norway sometimes. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe they still perceive the English Channel as being too dangerous, and that's why they don't want to send over all their divisions, or at least some of their divisions, but they sure would be useful right now. The Japanese are doing something, can't really see what, but hopefully they're still not doing the Americans any surprises. Hopefully they're not trying to surprise the Americans in any sort of well, desperate fashion. But what would what I would appreciate is the Germans doing something, because we're gonna run out of equipment soon here, and once we run out of equipment, the British can actually make a pretty substantial comeback. Because right now we're of course not fighting just the British, but we're also fighting the British Raj, the South Africans, the Australians, the New Zealanders, everyone like that, and they can eventually send their troops over to Britain, obviously, and just smash my little push here. And even the British themselves, look how many divisions they have just piling up on the onto the defense. It's actually kind of insane that we're still managing to push. Maybe it's because they're stretched so thin that they are just freshly deploying these troops, and it's looking like it. But bam, there we go. The United Kingdom has capitulated, and yeah, that's the war. That's the war. The Allies are done. The Allies are officially just done. It was a bold gambit, but well, a successful gambit at that. But yeah. Okay, so this is now the new state of the world. I took every single piece of land the British had in America except for Canada, because we never actually engaged their proper divisions, so they just got out with a white piece. But Italy owns everything in Africa, because that's sort of like what they were going for. We own everything in the Americas as well as the British Isles, because, well, if the Spanish in this game didn't invade the British Isles, nobody would have invaded the British Isles. So hey, there we go. I take full credit for that, and and the Germans took basically everything on the European mainland. So we sort of split up the empires according to sort of the historical preferences. But now begins the long period of industrial build-up for the eventual war with the United States, which is probably going to be even more painful than this one was. Okay, it's 1942. I think it's well time to actually take out Portugal. I sort of left them alone to, well, increase the probability that they'd have a lot of industry that we might be able to steal when we eventually take them over. I also sort of hoped that they would put up a big fight, but apparently I overestimated them, because this is even easier than the Francoist path, than the Francoist army had it. So yeah, sort of a disappointment. At the same time, at least we'll have a lot of equipment from this, maybe some experience. But yeah, there we go. We just lost basically nothing, and they lost like over 100k. So well, there we go. At least we have a huge stockpile of guns now. Okay, so I just did the reassert American dominance, which essentially means that you have the access to create a whole bunch of puppets throughout the entirety of Central America, the Caribbean and South America. Essentially all the smaller countries have a potential to become your puppet based on your, I think it's army size, industry size, general just land size overall, and just they take into account your power level and decide whether they want to be your puppet or not. Okay, but every time we create a puppet it lags like hell. Well, it doesn't matter. Okay, Paraguay rejects demand, so Paraguay rejected, and it seems like everyone else actually agreed. But the most important country here is probably El Salvador, because they have probably the biggest army. Sometimes they have up to 60 divisions, which, no, they aren't the best divisions, but they definitely pack a punch when it comes to just sending them to the front line, into the meat grinder, and asking them to, well, you know, serve the mother country, and to destroy the, I don't know, the United States oppression or something like that. The dominance of the United States has basically ended within the Americas, and the Spanish are slowly taking over, as is their rightful claim, obviously. That's completely legitimate, obviously, and as the Spanish Empire, as a member of the Axis, who now controls basically the entirety of Africa apart from Liberia, and yeah, the entirety of Western Europe, and yeah, so this is now completely legitimate. We're only extending the hand to our fellow Spanish-speaking friends, and so all in all, this is actually just a safekeeping mission. Actually, yeah, completely ignore the fact that we're going to declare war potentially on the people that don't submit to us. That is That's just a safekeeping mission operation, something like that. You can definitely see the legitimate all El Salvador's reject. So the most important one actually rejected. But I suppose that doesn't matter because we virtually got every single other nation. We can just now conscript there, or we can now ask these nations to contribute to the future peacekeeping mission, which is completely legitimate, and we ask them that they contribute some forces, some industry, some forces, and oh, actually, these guys have quite a lot of divisions. That's probably because they start off as fascists, so they have a lot more manpower. Yeah, there we go. And of course, Cuba. And yeah, so overall, actually, quite a pretty decent amount of divisions, all things considered. Now, obviously, we have done some nice build-up, and I think our Spanish forces, our core Spanish forces, are gonna attack from the north, take out Canada, slowly advance into the United States, and I want this Latin horde, the conscripted horde of the smaller American countries to deal with Mexico. They're probably not going to be able to actually defeat Mexico, but just to keep them preoccupied, because the Mexicans sometimes can have actually pretty decent divisions. And also the Americans tend to support the Mexicans in their war when it comes to the potential invasion down south. The United States tends to send some divisions there also. So essentially we'll only be using these guys as a distraction when it comes to the main Axis front advancing from the Canadian, or basically from Newfoundland. We're going to, yeah, we're going to use them as a distraction, but we can safely assume that their mission is going to be a peacekeeping one, because due to the anarchy that's going to be going on up north, they want to preserve a peaceful relationship with the Mexicans down south, and the Mexicans might object to that. So a preemptive strike against the Mexicans is going to be, yeah, that's going to be completely valid, I think. Yeah, we'll go with that. And here we go. It's time to actually take out the Americans, even though they're somehow preparing a battle plan against the British, which they don't even exist anymore. But okay, well, that's just the Americans that play anyway. And we can choose to call all of our little puppets in, but I don't think so. Let's just see how let's just do something with the Japanese in the meantime, so that they have some confidence in us, maybe something like that. I don't know. But we can choose to call on our entire alliance to deal with them, but in the meantime, I think it's going to be... these things don't really matter anymore, do they? Now we'll just take out the United States, and that's gonna be it. So yeah, might as well just get a war goal on Brazil while we are at it. So yeah, we're gonna activate the horde. However, I'm not entirely sure if I want to push from just my territory, or if I want to push from... Yeah, I suppose that's gonna be good enough. We've actually been building quite a lot of compliance in the meantime in both Canada and the United States, so hopefully they'll be able to fall quite easily. And yeah, so now we're just waiting for Canada to join in, so we can actually have a bit of a fun time with them. If they don't join, then we'll just justify on them separately. But I'm not actually sure if... yeah, Mexico, there we go. So, here we go. Gonna try and advance through Belize, I think. Yeah, Belize on its own. However, I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be actually very, very successful, because it's a narrow front, and we have quite a lot of divisions advancing down there, so... I don't know. It's going to be... Okay, do Vichy want to join? Well, sure, I think. Well, whatever the Vichy can do, I guess they can do whatever they want, because they don't have to fear the Free French coming around anytime soon. So, yeah, maybe the Germans will actually grant them the rest of their land back if they participate in this war enough. But hopefully we've built up enough of a defense all around the empire that we can safely assume the Americans won't be able to just do whatever they want with us. And this is going to be actually quite a tough war, I do think so, because, well, the Americans have had, well, since, let's say, Pearl Harbor, it's 1943, so they've had roughly roughly 2 years to actually prepare. Endgame, the Japanese actually tend to start the conflict with the Americans quite a bit sooner than historically, roughly in the summer of 1941, which obviously that's not very historically accurate, but that's just how it goes. So it's they've actually had roughly 2 years to prepare, and the Americans can build up very quickly when it comes to their land forces and naval forces. Hopefully the Japanese will be keeping them preoccupied in the Pacific enough for us to just safely storm down, but they aren't actually putting up any divisions on the Canadian front, which is quite curious. I would have thought that they'd have the entire armed forces, the entire military just stationed there, and they'd have tried to starve us out, but the southern advance isn't going all that well. So I think we'll call on these guys just to widen the front a bit, because the Axis forces there are actually stationed and just waiting to pounce. It's kind of strange they don't actually have any forces in my territory, but they're more than willing to support one of my puppets there. So yeah, let's go. The Canadians finally joined in, and we're going to have a fun old time blasting through Canada. I don't think Canada should be that big of an issue, especially because we created such a high percentage of collaboration within Canada and the United States as well, but Canada is a little bit easier to defeat than the United States. And seeing as we've blasted basically, yep, there we go, the Canadians have capitulated. There we go, we're actually halfway through to America actually. We haven't really gone through the entirety of the Canadian countryside back there. We haven't actually even gone there, but because we built up such a high collaboration percentage, the Canadians just gave up after we after we conquered a majority of the eastern side of the country. So I don't know, it's the collaboration stuff is actually a little bit too OP, I think. It also it takes quite a long time, but once you learn how OP it is, you just sort of rely on it. You know, even with the British, sometimes if you build up like a 100% collaboration status with them, once you take out like London, is just done. You know, they're just done, they pack it up. And I think, you know, on one hand, that's actually really interesting that the spies have such a very important role if a minor power wants to take on a larger power. At the same time, I don't believe there's any way to actually counteract that, as the power that's getting sort of that's being dominated by the spies. I don't think there's any like counter collaboration status that you can do. So I'm not entirely sure. Obviously the AI doesn't use the spy mechanic that often. Sometimes they do the decryption stuff, but other than that they don't really do much. So I don't know. Obviously the Germans have destroyed the Soviets a long time ago, so we don't really have to fear anything from that side of the world. But yeah, so once the United States fall, that's it. The Spanish Empire would have regained a majority of its holdings within the Americas, and the Germans would have wanted everything that they wanted, obviously. Yeah, the Italians would have gotten their American land. So ultimately, the Spanish Empire, the Falange Spain path, can be extremely powerful, but you have to, well, at least in this playthrough, I went with a very, very bold and risky tactic at the beginning, and it paid off, obviously. It was a very bold move, a very unwise move to a certain degree, because if we were to play sort of maybe more aligned with the Allies, we would have actually gotten out with a better result. If we joined the Allies, somehow, I don't know how, if you joined the Allies and then asked the small minor powers in the Americas to collaborate with you, once you're in the Allies and the United States is in the Allies, you can just take over those smaller countries, and even though they're guaranteed by the United States, you can just take them over and it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, you can also drag the United Kingdom into war with the United States if they keep you, if you manage to stay within the Allies, or if you're putting up enough of a fight against the Germans. That's a possibility, but I don't think that's necessarily how you're supposed to play this focused. You're supposed to do sort of the stuff that we did today, essentially. Just join the Axis, have a big old fun time in the Americas, and then, well, enjoy the spoils, I suppose. There we go, the war has been won, and now we are at peace. We got everything we wanted. Well, we didn't get Brazil and some of the Central and South American countries, but whatever. we essentially control the world now, and we could take out the Axis at this point. We could take out the Japanese, we could take out basically anyone, and it would be completely fine because we control majority of the industrial power of the world and a majority of the resources of the world, because we control the United States, we control a bunch of stuff in Canada, and that's that. Now, ultimately, when rating the Falange's path compared to the Franco's path is much, much easier, but it does give you less options when it comes to the focus tree. You have a whole bunch of options when it comes to rebuilding your country, but you have less options when it comes to expansions. You have to be a bit creative with the Franco's path. As you saw at the beginning of the video, we essentially had to sort of mix and match our options. We had to play off the Axis and the Comintern and the Allies against each other to really make it basically create chaos, out of which our empire rises, you know, like a phoenix. You could sort of talk about it like that, because we essentially had to trick the Axis and the Vichy French and the Allies to pit them against the Comintern and stuff like that. It's quite a lot of fun. The Phalange's path is also quite a bit of fun because you do gain access to those puppet states essentially in Central America. Let's just quickly fix these borders because they look really terrible. But yes, you do gain a bit of power from those puppets. You gain quite a big army, even though it's not that great. It's the numbers do actually make a difference, and they helped quite a bit when fighting against the Spanish, or the Mexicans, I mean, because they do distract the American AI quite a bit. And you do also gain some resources and some factories from them. So overall, the Phalange's path is actually quite a bit of fun, and but it's much more difficult than the Franco's path. If you want to have sort of a safer playthrough, go for the Franco's path. If you want to have, well, just a bit of a mess on your hands, then go for the Phalanges, definitely. Right, Kings, thanks for watching, and see you next time.